Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about something pretty incredible. The story of how we took flying from this chaotic, wild frontier and turned it into the super safe, regulated system that we all trust our lives with today. It's kind of funny when you think about it. Flying is statistically the safest way to get around. I mean, way safer than just driving your car down the street, but it absolutely did not start out that way. So how did we do it? How did we go from total chaos in the clouds to this clockwork precision we see now? Well, that safety wasn't an accident. It was built piece by piece over 100 years of trial, error, and rules. Okay, let's get into it. For basically all of human history, the idea of flying was pure fantasy. It was the stuff of gods and myths like Icarus. But that dream, that idea of soaring with the birds, it just never went away. It pushed centuries of inventors and thinkers and, let's be honest, a few daredevils to keep trying. And you can see that slow, steady progress right here. It starts with Da Vinci's amazing sketches. They wouldn't have worked, but the vision was there. Then, boom, 1783, the Montgolfier brothers actually get into the air with a hot air balloon. The problem? You can't steer it. Then comes Sir George Cayley, who figures out the basics of aerodynamics with his gliders. You see? Each step solved one more piece of this giant puzzle, all leading up to that one windy day at Kitty Hawk. And this right here, this is the key. This is what made the Wright brothers different. They weren't just guys in a workshop throwing things together. They were scientists. I mean, they built their own wind tunnel to test wing shapes. They treated flight like an engineering problem that had a solution. So their real triumph wasn't just getting a plane off the ground. It was proving how to do it, over and over again, with a method. And just like that, with 4 short flights, we're talking a grand total of 98 seconds in the air, humanity was in a brand new era. The dream was finally real. But making it practical, and way more importantly, making it safe, that was a whole other mountain to climb. Once powered flight was a reality, the floodgates just burst open. It was this incredibly exciting time, but the sky was basically the Wild West, a lawless, unregulated free-for-all. So you had this immediate tension, right? On one hand, you've got this incredible commercial promise. The first airline starts up. Airmail routes are stitching the country together. Flying is becoming a business. But on the other hand, there were 0 rules. Literally none. No one to say if a plane was built correctly, no licenses for pilots, and definitely no air traffic control. It was just fly and hope for the best. And if you want to know just how ready people were for this, get this. A former mayor named A.C. Fail paid $400 at an auction just for the bragging rights of being the very first paying passenger on that first flight. That was a ton of money back then. It just shows you the demand was there from day one. And look at the results from this little experiment. This first airline only ran for about 4 months, but in that time, it flew over 1,200 people across the bay. And the most important number, 0 injuries. This was the proof of concept. It showed everyone that flying people around wasn't just some crazy stunt. It was a real, viable business. And that leads us to the biggest question of the time. We know the tech works. We know people will pay for it. But how do you make it something the average person can trust? How do you scale this up and convince millions of people to get on a plane if there's no system in place to keep them safe? Well, the answer, as it turns out, was regulation. And even the industry knew it. They realized they couldn't grow, they couldn't build that public trust without the government stepping in to set some ground rules and create a real system. Now, this didn't all happen at once. It was a slow build. The first big step was the Air Commerce Act in 1926, which started licensing pilots and setting up some basic traffic rules. That grew into the CAA. But then, in the 1950s, with faster jet planes, there were some horrible mid-air collisions, and everyone realized we needed a more powerful, independent agency. And that's what the Federal Aviation Act of 1958 gave us, the modern FAA. And the FAA's mission is crystal clear. Their entire job, their whole reason for existing, is to manage every single part of civilian flying to make sure it's safe and it runs smoothly. They are, for all intents and purposes, the architects of the skies we fly in today. So how do they actually do it? Well, you can think of them as the ultimate gatekeepers. They're the ones who certify that pilots know what they're doing, that mechanics are properly trained, and that every single plane design is safe to fly. They literally write the rulebook for the sky, and then they run the entire air traffic control system that keeps all those planes from bumping into each other. And here's a great little piece of history for you. The very first pilot license, number one, wasn't given to some famous barnstormer. It was issued to the guy in charge of the whole program. It was this huge symbol that aviation was growing up, moving from a wild hobby to a serious, professional, and regulated industry. So all that history, all those rules, it brings us right here to today. It's created this incredibly structured, safety-first path for anyone who wants to learn how to fly. And when you really break it down, the process makes a ton of sense. First, you have to prove you're healthy and get a student certificate. Then, you train with a certified instructor who follows a standardized plan. And finally, you have to prove you know your stuff by passing tough written and practical tests from the FAA. Every single step is there to make sure you're safe and competent before you ever fly on your own. And the system isn't one size fits all. It scales up based on responsibility. So a private pilot who's just flying for fun needs a minimum of 40 hours. But if you want to fly for a major airline, you need an airline transport pilot certificate. And look at that jump, a minimum of 1,500 hours of experience. The point is, the more lives you're responsible for, the higher the bar is set. I love this quote from the FAA because it's so true. You can have all the rule books in the world, but the whole system really depends on the quality of the training. The FAA sees flight instructors as the front line, the people who are responsible for teaching not just the skills, but the mindset of a safe and professional pilot. And really, that's the big takeaway here. Every single handbook, every rule, every test, it's all one piece of a giant interlocking system that's been built and refined for over a century. And it's all designed from the ground up to do one thing and one thing only: create pilots that you and I can trust our lives with. So from the Wright brothers and their scientific method, all the way to the FAA and its complex rulebook, we managed to build a system that took a really dangerous dream and turned it into the safest way to travel. But when you look ahead at drones, flying taxis, commercial space travel, it really makes you wonder, right? What new rules are we going to have to write to tame the next frontier of the sky?